So yeah, the Bank of England raised its rates this week, Steve. It was up to 4.25% because it's following the US like a lost puppy. Whilst we have probably very little to add to any of this, it has meant that savings rates has risen again. So I had a good look around for everybody here, and I've tried to find the best savings accounts for you. So here's what I found. So Atom Bank and Monzo both raised straight away. They have instant savers that are now paying 3.2%. Zopa has snuck in just ahead of them at 3.21, although they haven't actually raised this rate yet. These can be boosted up to 3.47% depending on how much notice you want to give for your cash. But out in the lead for a standard regular saver at the moment is Chip with 3.4%. I'm disregarding three others in here just for complete transparency. Coventry, Paragon and Synergy, they all have rates at 3.25%, but they have stipulations and withdrawal limits that make them harder to use. All of these are FSCS protected, and again, for some full disclosure, I'm actually a Chip and Monzo shareholder. I don't think Steve is a Chip shareholder. Okay, so Chase disappointed. They only give you a 0.1% uplift, so they're going to 3.1%, and I've written in big text in my notes, laggers! So yeah, Zopa hasn't increased its rate. We'll have to see if they do. They could move back into the top spot. But yeah, they look pretty interesting to me. In terms of regular savers, Steve, there's some pretty good ones out there from the big names. First Direct is now offering 7%. You can deposit between £25 and £300 per month. Interest is going to be paid a year after the account opens, and you cannot close this one early. And it doesn't look like you can miss a payment either, but it's still 7%. It's pretty good rate. Lloyd's a little bit close behind, 6.25%. You can pay up to £400 a month, but you must be a Club Lloyd's customer, which is going to cost you some money. And NatWest is just behind them at 6.17. You can only put in £150 a month, and this tops out at 5k. Obviously, all of these are FSCS protected because they're all monster banks. I had a quick look at some fixes as well while I was looking. The best 6 month I could find was Alica Bank. It's 4%, but you're going to need 10k to open it. Best 9 month was Shawbrook Bank, again at 4%, but you'll need £1,000 to open it. Best 1 year fix I could find was with a company called SmartSave. 4.43%. Again, you're going to need 10 grand to open it. Oak North is only 0.01% behind at 4.42. You only need £1 to open that if you don't have 10 grand. Best 2 year was Synergy Bank, 4.47%. Again, you're going to need 10k. Best 3 year was Synergy again at 4.55. Again, the minimum is 10k. And the best 5 year at the moment that I could find was with Tandem Bank at 4.6%, and you're going to need £1 to open it. Again, all of those are FSCS protected, and I actually used Money Saving Expert for the last lot because I couldn't be bothered to search around all the tiny banks. I think some of these are pretty attractive, Steve. Do you think rates are still going to be at 4.6 in 5 years? I think that sounds pretty good to me.
I think they might be. There was a lot in that you kind of offered along the way. A couple of little bits from me in that case. The 7% First Direct thing I looked at after you mentioned it on one of our previous shows. I basically viewed it as like a bond from what I remember of it, in that you can't take it out for a certain amount of time. I think you have to pay in fairly often. But look, 7% for a sort of shortish term bond is a pretty good win. If, like me, you are in some sense self-employed and you put your tax money somewhere with a view to taking it out again when it's time to pay the tax thing, that's a pretty good place to be leaving it for a year, as the way I look at that kind of thing. The NatWest one at 6%, I do have that account, and it does top out at 5,000, as you mentioned, and you're dead right about that. And the pay-in is 150 a month limit, upper limit. You can do those if you spend out of your NatWest account. They will round things up into there for you as well, and they do double roundups. So you can add a couple of quid in here and there. If you're someone like me who likes putting £40 and 1p in their car, and whack that on your NatWest card, they'll round that up twice over into your 6% account for you. That's very much kind of clipping the edges a little bit here, but it's a thing that more than one bank is kind of offering at the moment, right? It makes the kind of Chase roundup thing look a little bit less impressive. I had a wild thought about some of these things for you, which was, you mentioned the Chase thing has sort of slipped below some of the others in terms of basic kind of instant access current savings account type thing. I wonder whether And when I think about what we've been thinking about with banks lately, and it's all about liquidity and about sticky deposits and that kind of thing, I wonder whether kind of offering people a better rate is a more compelling way of trying to get them to not pull all their money out of your bank and take it somewhere else. I don't think there's like a massive exodus of retail money chasing like incremental 0.2 higher rates in places. I don't think I'll run my stuff from Chase off to somewhere else because of they've slid behind to only 3.1, I think you said at the moment. But I wonder whether that kind of helps with this sort of thing.
I definitely did shuffle my money off, so we're in a different kind of camp here. I shuffled my money off Chase and into Zopa. I figure when they kick their rates up, we should be somewhere near Chip. For whatever reason, even though I'm a shareholder of Chip, I've never got on with their app. I think it's really gimmicky. You have to talk to a robot to get it open, and it all seems really childish to me. But they are offering a very good rate, and it's probably one of those that if I could swallow the using the app, I probably should do. But Zopa is really good. It's kind of got that Monzo feature where you get a main pot and you can split it all into all other little pots. And once you split that pot, you can then give notice on the various aspects. So you can bump it right up to 3.47% if you're prepared to give, I think it's 90 days notice before you get your money. That's pretty attractive, and they've been lifting it every time there's been a bank, an increase in the base rate. So I'd be interested to see where that goes.
Suddenly interest rates are looking interesting, all of us in the UK. I remember back in the day, this is around the time, for context, that internet banking was starting to become a thing, and people were a combination of taken with it and partly sceptical about its security, and in some cases with some justification. But I remember my mum used to work in a bank around this time. She worked for NatWest just as a cashier, not as anything kind of involved in higher up decision making. But I remember my dad and I around this time every year, start of new ISA season, having to spend ages on the phone doing what we called pyjama banking, because it was first thing in the morning, ringing places to move our accounts from one thing to another, chasing these kind of incremental rate points that you could get, because we got, 2.1% rather than 2.05% somewhere. I definitely have been the person who kind of went doing that. I sort of kind of given up for the moment, and rates seem to be going up fairly frequently at the moment, which I suppose means you might be doing this again next month.
Yeah, I mean, we were quite lucky as kids because we used to live on one of the main roads in East Hull, so we had every bank down that street. So on the drive home, my old man could see what they were advertising, and then he would I feel like it was a Saturday, but it can't have been because banks are never open on Saturdays. But he used to get me and my brother up and walk us to one of these banks, and we would move our ISAs there every year. And I do remember quite sort of vividly going into Halifax one year and getting a 10% interest rate on my cash ISA for a year, which probably equated to nothing because I don't think I've ever really had very much money in it. But God, they were the days, Steve.
Those were the days when people used sentences like, we were quite lucky as kids because we used to live on one of the main roads in East Hull. Steve D checking his privilege, ladies and gentlemen. So interest rates keep going up. I think they're going to keep going up a little bit. But one of the things that was sort of striking to me about this one, which went to exactly where people thought it was going to, rates are now 4.25%, as you point out. It follows the US like a lost puppy, but never catch up to it. Never, ever get yourself to the level that they are. Just always stay slightly behind them in terms of what you do. Yet again, I hear kind of noises about people will cling to anything for the idea that interest rates are not going to go up again. So maybe they won't increase them this time because there's been a bank problem. While in almost the same sentence telling that wasn't really a bank problem, that was a couple of isolated things with banks that weren't very well run and had undiversified client bases and not enough liquidity and lumped it all into long-term bonds and so on. But maybe because there was a bank that was apparently really stupid, people won't raise interest rates. Inflation's just gone up again in the UK. That isn't coming anywhere near the sort of 2% it was supposed to be at. It's now 10 point something higher than it was before. The idea that people think that there's going to be a slowdown in interest rate rises, or there might be a slowdown in them, I guess, but that they're going to not raise them the next time, based on that, people will reach for anything, as far as I can see, to look for that bit of optimism about interest rates. Yeah,
I mean, you remember a year ago when I think we were all talking in the Discord with, and it was ISA investor who said, like, I hope they just rip the Band-Aid off and just jam the rates up, because getting to 4% over a slow period of time and just slamming 4% on, even though it's completely unheard of. I don't really see how it would have caused any different issues. I know it gives the banks time to adapt to the change in rates if you do it sort of slow and steady, but the banks haven't adapted. The ones that were going to fail have failed, and I don't see why ripping the band-aid off wouldn't have made any difference. But the UK, we're not even halfway towards the inflation rate at the moment, so for people to think that it's coming down would be unheard of for the inflation rate to come under the interest the Bank of England base rate, with it being only halfway there.
I can't remember whether we've talked about this before or not, but it's kind of core CPI and that kind of thing, which excludes food and fuel. And people wonder about why it excludes food and fuel, because they're sort of fairly core to most people's living. I don't know what the official justification is, and I think a lot of the inflation that we were seeing was coming from food prices staying high. But that would go some way towards explaining why rising interest rates are not really working, because whether or not you eat or whether or not you heat your house isn't really sensitive to what interest rates are. People do that at whatever the price is. They might well ditch a load of other spending along the way, or find they have to ditch a load of other spending along the way. But in terms of demand for, or supply-demand imbalance, which I guess is what inflation is, between fuel and food, I'm not sure that interest rates is going to make much difference there. But nonetheless, it's the only thing we can do as the Bank of England, so we're going to try and do that.